I forgot to tell you, it's very spicy.
It's spicy.
Is it that one?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
So you
what
got
a
the
waste.
lime harissa.
Oh man, this is just getting bigger and bigger. All right, Pietro, what do you think, man? Should we get in?
You feeling ready?
Yeah, we all ready to talk a little Aglianico tonight?
Ready to drink.
Ready to drink? Oh, all right. Well, we're gonna get off on the right foot. Cool.
Yeah, these
All
aren't
right.
tasting pours. These are drinking pours.
All right, folks, welcome. This is probably our last little tasting of 2020. So we want to thank everyone for coming, and this is by far our biggest turnout, biggest blowout. Alessandro was he was in the weeds. In the restaurant business, we like to say in the weeds. And Alessandro was in the weeds today, and I was in the weeds and 2 points today. So very happy to be back in the weeds and have so many orders going out. So thank you all for responding, and I hope you're enjoying what's in front of you. I hope you've taken some time to open 1 or 2 wines, or for you hardcores, if you've opened the Master Berardino already. I don't know if anyone has, besides Mary. Adrian, I know you did. Be sure to decant that thing, and then go downstairs with the decanter and run around the block 3 times. Then come back upstairs, and the wine should have evolved. I heartily recommend with the Master Berardino, and I won't spend any time on it right now, but for you to save 2, however many people there, a glass each for tomorrow. Because what that wine does overnight in the bottle with the cork on top is revolutionary. It really makes a big old jump. It becomes much more textured. So yeah, that's what I recommend. But yeah, thank you all for being here. Pietro and I have been doing this for, I don't know, last couple of months, where we dig into some native grapes of Italy, and a very kind of casual, discussion-oriented roundtable kind of thing. This is not a class, although I'll throw up some slides in a second just so we can look at some maps of Italy as well as some of Pietro's maps. It's really more about kind of discovering a grape that's traveled kind of across the world, across the globe, in 2 distinct places, where it was born and where it's kind of becoming revitalized. And ask questions. You have a winemaker here as well as a chef on the back burner, and I think you can all, when you taste your dessert, those of you that have purchased it, you'll see Pietro's a dangerous man in the kitchen. I tasted it myself, and it was damn good. So I'm excited that that's out there. But a winemaker who makes a lot of wines up in Lake County, and focuses really solely on Italian grapes for the most part. And I'm not going to talk too much about him since most of you know him. And that's it. Pietro, you want to say anything about? We have a nice big group in front of us and some, lot to talk about.
Yeah, it's wonderful to close out on a big group for sure, and especially with Alessandro's food making the rounds. And Aglianico is a great grape to finish the year on too. So yeah, looking forward to this.
Yeah, really versatile grape. I don't know. Usually we dive in and talk a little bit of a history or so, but we'll get to that. Pietro, can I ask you a couple of questions?
Sure.
All right. So this is a multi-vintage wine, yeah?
Yes.
And for Pietro's wine, it should be in your first glass, I would think. And I hope you all are swishing and swirling and getting opinions about this wine, because we're going to ask you about it.
Yeah, 15 and 16 vintage in that one. 20, I don't necessarily like doing non-vintage wines, but it's become a little bit more of a thing. But 2015 vintage in California was exceedingly strange. It was the 4th drought year in a row, and yields across the state were down by 50%, 60%, just huge amounts. It was a strange vintage, a cooler vintage, actually. And Aglianico in particular, just massive face-ripping tannins. We usually get about 8 Bordeaux-sized barrels out of our block, sometimes 7. Barely got 4 that year. And it was just a really interesting, the vintage just spoke so strongly, but it was nothing but tannin, acid, and black rock. The 16 vintage was much more, less dramatic, more fruit. Actually, if anything, it swung the other way and was kind of boring by Aglianico standards. So it just kind of made sense to put the two together in this particular case.
Is it
And now I'm going to have tons of non-vintage wines because of fires and smoke years and other intervening factors. So unfortunately, it's going to be a thing, but it's kind of it's an interesting option to have. I think the wines mature in sometimes unexpected ways doing that as well. You would think, same vineyard, same soil, similar practices, everything would just blend together. But especially with the Aglianico, that you see pretty dramatic differences year to year.
Right.
Because Aglianico, for all of its burliness, also it's like Sangiovese. It transmits a lot of information underneath all that brutishness. So it shows vintage very well and soil very well, which is unusual for such a robust grape.
Right.
Let's throw that out there.
When did you start working with Aglianico?
2007 was the first bottled vintage. Yeah, and man, it took a few years with the Aglianico. It's not terribly difficult to work with. It's not particularly reductive. It doesn't have sulfur aroma problems, anything like that. But just managing tannin and acid and then just fermentation practices. So now I don't pump it. I move it all by hand with buckets and tubs, do small bins. So just everything to be as gentle with it as possible, but also to keep as long a fermentation as possible. And I have a couple barrels of 100-day maceration Aglianico that I don't know what I'm going to do with. I'm still waiting for something magical to happen with that. That could be a 10-year project.
Did you say 100-day maceration?
Yeah.
Damn.
There's a couple of experiments.
Nice.
Where it actually, usually like Cabernet, you can get Cabernet is famous for long, extended macerations, increases body color, all that stuff. And at one point, the tannin kind of drops out and starts to get smoother and rounder. Aglianico does not do that.
So how do you prevent spoilage with that kind of maceration?
I sealed it up in drums that were completely filled to the top, just to make sure no air was getting in there.
No surface area if possible.
I check on it every couple of weeks.
How many days on the skins are what we're drinking?
I don't remember exactly, between 15 and 16, but I'm running, 20, 22 days if I feel like I can get it. It just kind of depends on how much tannin is going on that year in particular.
Right.
At some point you gotta, just cut it and say like, if this gets any drier, we're gonna have a problem. But in some like 2019, actually very velvety tannin, just something about the way the fall heat spikes went. Yeah, it's funny. These last few years, I've been seeing more and more variation texturally in the Aglianico.
And when did you bottle this guy?
That was an average of 30 months of barrel age between the 16 and so part of it was, 38 months and 26 months.
Right.
So it takes extended barrel age very well. And these are small Bordeaux size barrique. They're not, large,
right,
large classical style.
So with Aglianico, I mean, it's a grape that's, it's got a lot of synonyms. It's got a few biotypes, but there's the big three, and which grapes do you have for your Aglianico? And we'll talk a little bit about the big three. It's kind of the big three areas in Italy where Aglianico is grown.
Yeah. So these are two different Tarazi clones. So the premium real estate in Aglianico land. We have two different types that they grow there, but they look radically different. And one of them has very bad red blotch and a couple other things going on with it. But they're noticeably different. One, very small berries, very symmetrical, more fruit driven, lots of little tiny green shot berries like Zinfandel has.
Right.
And great airflow, very open clusters. And then interplanted in with it is a different clone 02, that one's 07, which is the opposite. That almost grows like Petite Syrah, very like leathery. It's a Tarazi clone as well, but it's very rustic. I actually would like to isolate them and vinify them separately someday. But I think one of the things that kind of works for us is we have a fruit-driven clone and then one that's very, earthy, leather, mushroom, all those secondary sort of characteristics that we harvest at the same time. And that one, because of all the diseases in it, it doesn't develop high sugar, which kind of moderates everything. So it's, it's kind of like doing a little field blending almost.
So, folks, it's we can get into like biotypes and clones and stuff, and it can get a little confusing. And I've been reading about it, like grapes like Sangiovese for years, and I still can't quite get my hand around it. But with Aglianico, what we're talking about, there are three kind of major biotypes of Aglianico. And these ones have been genetically researched in the University of Milan by Attilio Scienza. It's a very, very important name when it comes to figuring out where these grapes come from and who their parents were. Aglianico, we don't know who their parents are at all. And for the longest time, it was considered that Aglianico, being a grape that comes from kind of where the Roman Empire lived, so to speak, is a grape that came maybe from the Greeks and or from the Romans, but certainly was prevalent in that time with a wine called Falernum. But we really don't know what grapes were being kind of grown and made into wine back then, with the exception of maybe one or two in Rome, in Lazio. But here on this map in front of you, I'm going to back up just a little bit to give you an idea. So Campania is in southern Italy. We're along the Turanian Mediterranean. That's along the southwest here. The Adriatic is to the east and the Ionian is to the south. So that kind of encompasses, Mediterranean Europe at this particular area. And Campania really kind of runs along the coast. And Aglianico itself is grown in a couple of areas here. I will say the most important, which is the Mastro Berardino 2014, comes from the area of Taurasi, up in the hills of Avellino. And there are these hills that they rise upwards of 400 meters in some of the very best vineyard sites. This is an area where, you have that wonderful kind of mix where you have the Mediterranean breezes that flow in from the west, moving their way eastwards, but you also have kind of cool, higher altitude, mountainous soils, which are very poor in terms of the nutrients that you really need, but also just the air temperature. And as the peaks turn and as these vines turn, it gets quite cool. So you have this wonderful battle between the Mediterranean and the mountains, and this helps to give an effect called the diurnal shift, which is hot days and cold nights. And grapes love that kind of stuff. And this is really where Aglianico is kind of itself. This is where a lot of people thought it to be born. This is certainly where it rose to prominence. And Taurasi is the name of the area, but whenever you say Taurasi, you really are talking about Aglianico at 85%, and then some other grapes blended in. And it's considered to be the king of the South. You hear that a lot. I like to think of this area, it reminds me a lot of Barolo, in the way the hills are, in the climate a bit, but also in the expression of the grape Aglianico here, because it becomes more vertical, a little bit more straight up and down. It's got a little more austerity. It's got tannic grip, to be sure. Aglianico does all over, but it's got a kind of I don't know how to quite put it. The tannins hold on to you in a different way than they do if you were bringing yourself to Taborno, which is the other Aglianico. So you have Taurasi, Aglianico di Taurasi is our first biotype. And I think Pietro was talking about it a little bit with the smaller berries, the more cylindrical bunches. And then you have the Taborno, Aglianico di Taborno, which is the second biotype. And the third one is not actually here in front of us, but it's to our friends to the east in Basilicata, and that's Aglianico del Velture. And that's the third biotype, and that's a much fleshier, fruit-driven, darker style. So that's kind of the big three when it comes to Aglianico. Those are the big three biotypes that play a lot. And one of the wonderful things I think about Aglianico is that it has such versatility. So we're drinking one here from Lake County, and then once you taste the San Salvatore, you're drinking one from Southern Campania, which is just a whole different juicy, broad expression. And then if you get a chance to taste the Taurasi, you're tasting a much more structured, robust expression with a little bit more backbone and a little bit more length to it. I always get talking too much. Pietro, you got to stop me.
I love it.
For you.
Going.
Sorry to interrupt. So why is everything in Campania a little bit fleshier, juicier? Is it a difference in elevation or being closer to the sea or exposure versus the Taurasi being more structured? Because it doesn't seem like there's a big difference in elevation. So what's going on there?
It's the soils mainly. We're looking at these kind of like old volcanic soils with these limestone outcroppings. It's volcanic and then calcareous marls that are interspersed. Then you have these like limestone outcroppings, like the Radicchi and the Montebello vineyard where this comes from. It's on its like own limestone outcropping. And you know what limestone does to these grapes, really gives it energy and focus. I think where the San Salvatore, the Paestium, I don't know if it's at around 400 meters. I thought it was a lot less in altitude, but to me that has a much darker, juicier profile than the Mastro Berardino, which to me is smokier. It's a bit broader on the palate, but definitely soil is the big kicker here. But also, Adrian, it's also that breeze thing from the Mediterranean, and then when that cool air temperature, that's a big part of it. That's what makes Taurasi, I think, one of the serious wines of Italy, along with Brunello and Barolo.
I almost get some sort of a Northern Rhone type funk almost on the Mastrovedino.
Yeah.
Like there's so much richness, meatiness, iron almost in that. Just on the nose. Yeah.
A lot of complexity there. It's an older vineyard. And I was incorrect on my card. The first vintage was not 1929. That was Mastro Berardino's kind of unveiling Taurasi itself. The first vintage was 1986 of the Radicchi. But it's an old vineyard. And it's one of the most impressive Taurasis I've had. If you ever get a chance to get the 98, it's very special wine. And many wine writers, Luigi Varnelli, a lot of wine writers in Italy, but a lot of kind of top 100 lists in the world list the 1968 Mastro Berardino Radicchi Riserva as one of the great wines of the world, which I think is cool. Never had it. Yeah. What else, Pietro?
Yeah, what else can be said about it? Well, just a quick overview of its history in California, which is actually quite short, which is always amazing to me because you had so many Southern Italians coming over, certainly my own family. But I think it was sort of a different context, their arrival. Some of the earlier people, if you're looking at California wine history, 1880s, 1890s, you had a lot of Northerners and Tuscans coming over and establishing successful wineries. But there weren't that many Campanians or Sicilians, until 1898, 1900. And I think then it was they weren't necessarily people from extremely successful business-minded families. People always ask, why didn't your family bring cuttings over? And just don't think that probably just wasn't the context or the point of getting out of a poverty-ridden situation and going to a new place necessarily, the idea of reestablishing the same thing. So it's an interesting question, though. And of course, we had Barbera, Nebbiolo, Sangiovese by 1850 in California, mostly up here in the north, but a little bit down south, a little bit in LA as well, 1900. But Aglianico, as far as we know, was not among that. Certainly some of the other grapes like Sagrantino are nowhere to be found either. The first California Aglianico planting is generally known to be Caparone, which is in Paso. So
Wow.
yeah, he was very interested in planting Italian varietals, a great agriculturist, viticulturist. He got cuttings through UC Davis. They weren't actually available on the market. This was before anybody wanted Aglianico cuttings. So through some of the people at Davis, he was able to get them and propagate them. And the first vintage of American Aglianico was 1992.
Do you know if it was Taurasi cuttings or is it?
I don't.
I
I was actually glancing over some notes and I didn't see anything specific. It wouldn't surprise me if they were. I'm trying to, Taurasi, I think it became a DOC in 1970 and a DOCG in maybe 1990 or 92.
93.
93. So these are, it's a pretty recent addition to the pantheon of what, that we would study that for a sommelier thing. This is not something going back quite like some of the other Italian grapes that are.
No, and despite its history, Campagna and Taurasi, with the Roman Empire and all that stuff, really modern wine technology, modern winemaking didn't make it into Campagna until like the 1950s and 60s.
Yeah, I was going to say, phylloxera didn't hit southern Italy until 1935, which had the same devastating effect. And then you had World War II and aerial bombings and poverty and Reconstruction. And it's not surprising that Aglianico kind of got left behind, because of multiple forces going on.
One brief note, Antonio Mastroberardino, when he returned home just after World War II, he discovered his family's holdings. And Mastroberardino is 10 generations, consecutive generations farming that land. 10. And it was just ruin. That was phylloxera, late phylloxera. That was the World War II. That was both wars, frankly, and the depressions that followed. So it was a real mess when he arrived and helped to revitalize that.
Yeah, you don't have a whole lot of industry to help economically crawl out of that.
No.
I have a question for you. How challenging is this grape to grow? And I'm currently growing some Cabernet Sauvignon, Petit Verdot, and a couple others. Is this something you could use as a blending grape as well, or would you have to have sufficient amount to have it as a single variety?
It's not a heavy yielder, so it's not something that for corporate farming and large production it doesn't make sense, and it's a little bit finicky, but it's not as challenging as some other grapes I can think of. It's pretty resistant to rain, and there's not much, it's thick-skinned, so it doesn't get damaged very easily. It is very sensitive to mildew, which is a little bit strange. That might give some indication of the path it traveled to get where it is. But it's a contender. Warmer climates, they should be planting them because it needs very little water.
Nice.
And it's Aglianico can be versatile. We had a rosé, an very early pick rosé in our rosé tasting a couple of months ago. There's sparkling Aglianico. Making white wine out of Aglianico was pretty common for a while. It's not like the Cabernet family, so it doesn't have that green jalapeno pepper pyrazine problem. So you can pick it at different. It can be herbaceous if you're trying to make a full red wine out of it and you pick too soon. I've had a couple of these, the more modern style. It can be it's not jalapeno, but it's more like, chewing on a mouthful of leaves and these kind of things. So that is there. But it's a grape that California should be really, and people are tinkering with it. Larkmead is tinkering with it now. It's one of the grapes that pops up as a possible Napa future planting sort of thing.
I have two wineries that are dealing with it seriously: West of Temperance and Stereophonic, and they're both of them are making excellent Aglianico. I will say, John, that Aglianico is, just from my knowledge base in Campania, in the Taurasi DOC, it can be a minimum of 85%. So they bluff and blend in a local grape called Piedirosso, but you'll also see like Sangiovese and Nebbiolo and Cabernet and stuff being blended in there to effect. It's not
Let's fill it out. Okay.
not a style of wines, but they're a style of wines, and
All right.
it's beautiful. Yeah.
Thanks.
I have a question.
Absolutely. I was just about to seek you out. What's your name? First name? Sorry.
Oh, my name's Molly Lurkett. No, my name is Ben Rigger.
Thank you, Molly.
I have a like viticultural question. So like you just mentioned the disease that wiped out a bunch of stuff. Is it difficult to actually like go and bring cuttings into like go on a trip where you go find cuttings or talk to people and then come back to the stateside and actually like, what does that whole process look like? That seems like it'd be like fraught with a bunch of custom stuff. But like, I'm just deeply curious about like if people go on exploratory cutting missions and try to bring stuff back.
Well, people do that. They still do that. And it's a bit like coughing in the grocery store without a mask during COVID, though. It's definitely frowned on in the industry at this point. If you know, over in San Francisco, there's a winemaker named Brian Harrington, who recently, after 25 years or so, closed up shop. But every spring, he would go over, take a trip to Spain, Portugal, Southern Italy, Sicily, and bring cuttings back and give them to Davis and Foundation Plant Services, who are the people who take cuttings, put them through 3 years of testing and work and try to get the diseases out of them if they're present. So they do this culturing and heat treatment and all of this, get rid of leaf roll and fan leaf and red blotch and all of that stuff. And then once they decide that the vines are clean, then they can release them to the different vineyards and propagators so that they can start grafting them onto rootstocks. So there is a control system in place for hunting stuff down. But grapes are kind of monocultural. A lot of vineyards we have a lot of disease issues that are popping up, not just pests from other places, but even pruning diseases. It turns out that one of the big things with virtually any vineyard is just controlling mildew. It's kind of the common cold of wine grapes. And typically sulfur is the classical way to deal with that, which works, just elemental sulfur. The mildew is adapting and starting to split into 4 different types that it's all sulfur resistant. So we're starting to see some of that adaptation and mutation of some of the problems. So there's a lot of pressure on people like, please don't bring in cuttings. Don't go to your grandmother in Sicily and bring back 3 sticks of whatever, because we don't know what's part of the DNA of that at this point. So it's adventurous and awesome, but fraught with possible danger and possible beauty.
Are they really just like sticks that you just take a cutting of the stem, like the woody tissue, and you bring it back?
Yeah, grapes are great that way.
Ben, what are your intentions?
I have none. I don't know where. I can't even keep my ficus alive. Okay, like I'm not gonna go start a vineyard.
Mary, did you have
horrible disease from Italy?
Mary,
well, I was interested in what Pietro was saying and the gentleman's question about bringing in cuttings, because years ago I used to be in horticulture, and I still have a very good friend who runs a nursery. So I've been to Europe on various mad trips. And in general, if you're into horticulture, some of you may know this, no plant is safe. You know, you go around and you snip, snip. Well, I know that the whatever department is appropriate, certainly for nurseries, there are very stringent inspections on the nurseries and on the importation of plants. I mean, we brought a bunch of stuff back once from New Zealand, and the trouble we had to go to get those plants through and then have them held up in customs here while they were inspected. I mean, it was just amazing. And for my sins, I did once smuggle in a wonderful rose from somewhere in Wales. And when the damn thing grew, it was covered in some sort of disease. I had to pull it up and burn it and cross my heart and promise never to do it again. So I would think that for wine growers, it surely must be the same. I mean, you can bring things in your underwear, but it's not a good idea. And then otherwise, they really inspect you.
Yeah, this Sagrantino that I brought down from Washington had to spend the day crossing the California state line, and paperwork and back tracing and, you know, making sure everything was legit. I guess they were making sure it wasn't weed also, but.
It is fascinating what Pietro was mentioning earlier about all of the like what UC Davis does to get a clean strain, a clean varietal, and the heat treatment and all the rest. We're working on putting in a vineyard up in Washington State and learning about all the different clones, but then all of the different numbers of like Syrah 5, which is actually from Syrah 7, but was then heat treated. There's so much technology that has happened to make these grapes, these I don't know, biostocks safe and sustainable and propagatable without taking down all the other grapes in the region. So fascinating stuff.
Yeah, it's a big issue. And I have a friend who is a consultant now on that end, and there are nurseries that are, you know, known to be dirty nurseries, and then high reputation people. There were lots of controls and hot water dipping and sanitation and all of that stuff. And it trickles down. It's important.
I wonder if it's like distillation. I think, you know, you remove too many impurities and you run the risk of removing the personality.
Well, there is that, you know, some of these viruses that sometimes viruses can make amazing wine. Sometimes they limit sugar accumulation so your alcohol stays reasonable. Sometimes they shut off the maturation process at certain points when it wouldn't be happening otherwise, and can potentially make good wine. It's just, you know, it's a lot of possibilities and what ifs. And everything has some problem. Grapevines are like people. We all got something. I mean, therapists will find something if they look hard enough.
We could talk about the gross mold, botrytis cinerea, or we could talk about, you know, partially raisined grapes on the vine, and all that's being made, you know, being produced in some really beautiful, opulent wines.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Brettanomyces, these things. Anyway. Yeah. Should we get in the glass here? Do we have any other quick questions, or should we talk about what's in these glasses, or what do you think?
Well, you're hungry?
Yeah.
Are you pretty hungry?
Yeah. Pretty hungry. Thank you. Cool. All right. I think so. So let's, I think we all started with Pietro's wine.
Can I quickly ask, is it in
Please.
either case just Aglianico? Or does it have any other wines in there?
Oh, no, 100%.
And the one from Italy too? You don't know.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that question. I apologize.
If it was just, Pietro already answered. His is 100% Aglianico. Is the Italian one also 100% Aglianico?
Yes, ma'am. From Pasium. And yours is 100% Aglianico, right?
Yes. And my understanding is that even though other grapes are allowed to be blended in depending on the areas, different percentages, but is it correct, Paul, that most producers, at least with Tarazi, are 100% Aglianico? generally speaking, or does it?
The ones that I've come across, but I think there's just not enough talk that makes its way to the United States. Because I just don't come across a lot. I can talk a couple of producers, Luigi Tecce, and and there's a few out there, but I haven't tasted a great deal of Taurasi in my experience.
These are old vineyards
The
too.
best ones are all Aglianico. What's that?
I would assume, being old vineyards too, that there's probably some other stuff in there a little bit.
Absolutely. I think the minimum 85% is not just for the winemaker stylistically, but also maybe to cover the butts a little bit. I'm gonna just quickly raise our glasses to the chef, who has arrived fashionably late because he thinks he's a movie star in Milan.
I didn't get your.
But I want to say thank you to Alessandro. I hope you all are enjoying your
Thank you. Great food.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
Good.
Yeah, the oxtails are really, really outstanding.
Phenomenal.
Thank you. I'm glad you like it. It's a traditional from Rome, so I hope you enjoy it.
Grazie.
Grazie.
Awesome.
Good. All right. Well, I'm just going to start us off here on Pietro's wine and then kind of let you guys take it away. My brother just put a beautiful plate of food in front of me, so I'm going to dig in just a little bit. But for my own part, and during these discussions about wine, I hope you all just jump in. I do hope you've taken a moment to try these wines kind of independently of each other and maybe put some notes in your mind or down on paper, because it's always helpful to throw into the discussion, because I think the discussion grows more and more the more opinions are thrown in the hat. But for me, for my mind, Pietro's wines, they're always, they always have a really beautiful expression of fruit to them. And I thought the Sagrantino was going to be the rough and tumble, but for me, his Aglianico is the most aggressive on the palate and structured, and it screams at you right off the front. For me, I was kind of hit with a wall of kind of seeded, like blue and black fruits. A lot of just refreshing acidity, but then you kind of get opened up a little bit into a little bit of cigar box and a little bit of forest floor, and all those things are kind of wrapped around this unctuousness, but not soft. It's an aggressive wine, and I kind of dig that. So that's my reading of Pietro's Aglianico. Who wants to jump in next? Adrian, take us away, man.
All right. So obviously, I hate your wine because this is the glass and it's already empty, so I need to refill. But my experience was actually a little bit different. As I tasted the first two wines, your Aglianico was actually it was assertive. The tannins were there, but they were well integrated. They were not super in my face on the first pour, and I really liked that because the Lungano, the IGP wine, was much more aggressive as I perceived it. But then when I first poured your wine, I did get some of the dark fruit, but then also some of the tertiary notes of, to me, petrol still going off. And so that flavor is changing as I drink more. And just a lot of fun. I'm not sure if the petrol is characteristic. I got a little bit of it, or some of the, almost a little bit of sulfur actually on the last wine. And yeah, fun way to start.
Cool. When you say the sulfur, were you talking about Pietro's or are you talking about the other one, the San Salvatore?
I was talking actually about the Ridicchi.
The Ridicchi, the Mastroberardino. Gotcha.
Yeah, but in terms of the petrol, that's where when I first opened Pietro's and just swirled it, I mean, it was almost as if it was like a Riesling in terms of some of those petrol aromatics, even though this is a structured red wine. So a lot of fun, just very thought-provoking.
Cool.
Aglianico definitely needs some air to wake up and sort of recalibrate itself. So
He really likes Italian wines.
I know. Well,
so sometimes it can take take a little bit to kind of find its footing. I found
Really good. I don't cook swordfish is so easy.
I'm loving it. The second pour, it's opened up, and now it's really coming together. So thank you, Peter.
yeah, and I will say this bottling has the most body of I guess anything since 2007, and I think that's the strangeness of the 2015 vintage. Usually, something I enjoy in the Aglianico is it kind of tracks like Sangiovese for me, where it has a little bit, where it's very sort of vertical and has a little bit of hollowness to it. And this one was just, you know, just kind of a knuckle dragger all around, which can be fun, but I'm not sure that it's totally typical necessarily.
Well, but it's working perfectly with this food.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's the food component.
Yeah.
Cool. But I think that's what's cool about Aglianico is there's the Taurasi structured version, but there are just so many others.
Yeah.
I mean, you get closer to the coast, and Aglianico becomes like light, clean, and bright, and never more than medium body. Yeah. Then you get down to Paesium, where the second wine is the San Salvatore, which is kind of a cool producer who wasn't always making wine. This guy owns the largest herd of water buffalo in Campania, and he makes cheese. And he decided to make wine one day when he was somewhere on his property and came head to head with a water buffalo, which is no joke. And stared down this water buffalo, and for some reason said, "I want to start making Aglianico and Greco. I want to meet this guy." But
I mean, I understand that. Aglianico grapes won't headbutt you. That seems like definitely the safer call.
They kind of attack you a little bit. The San Salvatore is full natural winemaking, full biodynamic principles are involved in all of his stuff. But he really took it to the next level when it came to the winemaking. What do we think of the San Salvatore up against Pietro's? How are they different? There he is.
What are we looking at here?
Adrian, what does the quote say?
I don't know, but look at that picture. What are we seeing hanging down there? It's very authentic.
Very.
Is that what we're supposed to eat it with?
Ball? That's weird.
No water buffalo with milk cheese. Sorry, guys. In the diet.
We do have some meatballs, I think, in the main course. Oh, no, those are the oxtail.
Oxtail, yeah, there you go.
Probably the oxtail. Yeah. What do we think of the San Salvatore?
To me, it's a little mellower. It's kind of a softer, smoother. Yeah. If you had done a blind tasting for me and asked me which one was from Italy and which one was from California, I would have gotten it completely wrong.
You would have gone the other way. Pietro's
absolutely
the world, and yeah, cool. Oh, great. We should have blind tasted this then. That's awesome. Anyone else have that same experience? Feel like the San Salvatore is a little softer, maybe a little more plush, whereas Pietro's has a structured backbone.
So I was almost the complete opposite. With Pietro's, it was a little bit smoother, but then once the San Salvatore actually opened up, I started to notice it was a little bit smoother. But when I had that first glass of both of them, Pietro's was a little bit smoother, a little bit less tannic.
A little bit less tannic. Okay.
No, I agree fully that Pietro's is really Californian. It's good forward. It's much sweet, and the other one is much darker. But both are really excellent.
Oh, I'm glad you like them, sir.
Yes.
Yeah. For us, I think the San Salvatore, the Giuliano, is definitely a little bit lighter, easier to drink. So I agree that actually has a little bit of a Californian Western world type of flavor. The other two Aglianico, both the Radici original Italian and Pietro's are definitely much stronger statements in more connoisseur type of wine, I think. More difficult in the sense of it requires full appreciation. Incredibly flavored. A lot of bodies in both of them. Slightly different.
Thank you. That's a Sicilian perspective. Yes, Julian.
We opened up the Radici right after you dropped off the bottles today, and we only opened up the Prima Materia like a half hour before dinner, and the Ugano somewhere like in between.
Yeah.
And just as we're over the meal, we're finding that it's drastically changing as well. So it's kind of like a moving target.
Actually,
right now.
yeah. I wonder, Pietro, should we open yours also 2 hours prior? What do you think?
Probably wouldn't hurt. Yeah.
We'll try and
for us.
Tomorrow.
But that's something I actually. Oh, go ahead.
For us, we opened your wine before the food, and was pleasantly pleased with it. I mean, it was just drinkable. And when we opened the import, it didn't hold up to it. And I think it's because yours had much more body, and I like full-bodied wines. So this spoke to my preferences. And I salute you for a beautiful bottle of wine. Thank you for being part of these evenings.
Thank you so much.
Real pleasure.
I want that. Paul, does the San Salvatore have some oak on it? I was glancing over notes. I couldn't quite make out.
Man, I forget. Give me a moment. I'll find out.
I thought I saw a couple different treatments over time. And Aglianico can take oak too. I mean, that's another thing it can do in California.
Even the small barrique, even those 225 liters.
It can't take as much as Cabernet. I'll just say that for a fact, or Merlot, or anything like that, because you start to lose that mineral edge, I think, and that little bit of leanness that it does need in the middle. But it's not like Sangiovese that you have to be really careful with. It's pretty stout, so a little bit can uplift and pad the body out a little bit on it without totally losing the varietal.
So for the Giungano, the fermentation is it's temperature controlled in stainless steel tanks. They say long maceration. I don't really know what that means. I don't think it's as long as what we're talking with Pietro's wine and with Taurasi across the board. But then it's about a year in tonneau, which is 40% new, and then 40% second and third passage. And then they do use barrique, 20% new, and then stainless steel. So they do this regimen of
the full spectrum.
Yeah, the full spectrum. For me, I find the San Salvatore has layers to it. The more I drink it, the more it reveals a layer. It's not as dark. It doesn't turn, like a street corner in the heart of Rome, like the Mastro Berardino does, hour in and hour out. To me, that wine changes fundamentally. But I think the San Salvatore is in like a little scooter, just kind of making little turns. I like that.
The silver oak with the Italian.
Okay. Provenance is Lake County.
Yeah, the Provenance is Lake County.
Hey, Pietro, will you talk a little bit about Lake County for a sec?
Yeah. And I apologize if I'm just repeating things I've said in the other.
We have a few new faces.
Other tastings. So Lake County, just north of Napa, and then on the west side, it touches both northern Sonoma County and Mendocino County. The western edge of Lake County is actually that's a good map right there. The Mayacamas Mountains. That sort of creates that divide. So if you're driving up Napa Valley through the town of Napa, going north to Calistoga, that mountain range on your right side that separates Sonoma County from from Napa County continues all the way up through Lake County and actually into Mendocino County as well. So in a way, it's sort of a continuation of Napa County, but it's further from any bodies of water. So it doesn't get a whole lot of coastal influence. It doesn't get a whole lot of bay influence. So it tends to be on the warmer side. has some of the clearest, cleanest air in California when things aren't burning anyway. It's separated from the Central Valley by another mountain range also, so it's kind of a high altitude bowl. And right now, Lake County has about 12,000 acres of grapes planted, and a lot of Napa County people are up there planting. Sonoma County folks as well. Land development is pretty easy, and it's about a tenth of the cost of doing something in Sonoma County or Napa. So there's a lot of development going on right now. It's still very Cabernet focused, which, you know, that's the business side. But Lake County can do really, really well with Rhone varietals as well. Lake County Grenache, I think, could be fantastic. Mourvèdre would be wonderful in lots of locations in Lake County. Syrah, there's a fair amount of Syrah up there, but you can't really get that really exotic, cool climate Syrah element up there. But the grape growing starts at about 1,300 feet and goes all the way up to 3,200 feet. And lots of little microclimates, different wind pockets, different soil types. Where we're at, you can see on the map there's a little Prima Materia sign with a line going to Kelseyville. We are 2 miles from a volcano that last erupted 11,000 years ago and is one of the 10 most dangerous volcanic fields in the US. And then 2 miles is where the Mayacamas really start shooting up. So we're in kind of a nice little transitional pocket. Someday down the road, I'll get some really steep hillside stuff that's impossible to work. Right now, we're on a nice mix. We're up above the lake, so we don't have the cooling effect of that. But we've got some really rocky soil, clay, lots of volcanic chunks of obsidian. You can tell that things were exploding and running downhill a lot in the area. I'll just put it like that. Yeah, and Lake County is full of different pockets. On the other side of the lake from us, there's an east-west running valley with an entirely different volcanic profile called High Valley that a lot of people are exploring right now. It's cool enough with those winds to make Pinot Blanc and Gewürztraminer in some areas, as well as Big Malbec and Cabernet. So a lot of microclimates and a lot of potential. And on the screen right now is just a quick map of our little 12-acre vineyard. The Aglianico would be the G section, kind of in the middle there, planted 2003. Yeah, there's two different types. Those were the only two types of Aglianico that were available at that time. And now there are a bunch of Basilicata clones that are becoming available, which, and we still have 2 acres that we could plant. I would really love to explore some of those as well. But Aglianico, even though the Tarazi area does have calcareous soil, it's also very adaptable to more acidic volcanic soils.
Yeah.
So it doesn't seem to really, because it holds acidity so naturally, and some of the components that it likes, like it actually likes boron and some other elements that some other things don't like. It's actually very compatible with a wide range of soils.
Yeah, and those hills in Avellino in Campania, as they rise up, those soils get more and more acidic. They get older and older the higher you get. And there's calcareous marls that are kind of interspersed in there.
Yeah, there's a vineyard or a winery down in Paso called Giornata that specializes in Italian varietals also.
Right.
Friends of mine. And they have 2 Aglianico vineyards they work with. And I'm blanking on the name at the moment, but one of them is inland. It's hotter, sort of the east versus west Paso thing. But the one closer to the ocean is relatively cool, and there's limestone there. Different pockets of it just appearing, peeking out here and there. And that particular Aglianico they make from that vineyard it's very Italianate. It's cooler climates. The alcohol is a little lower. Acidity is higher from the different soil type. It's more of that medium weight, very strict, kind of like people find it austere, but in that austerity are all these super nuanced, beautiful things. And, you could sit and write a book just going through all the different layers that pop up with time through it.
Yeah.
Just responding to soil and climate and, these natural elements.
Yeah.
Pietro, in the olden days, your great-grandparents probably, they looked outside and they looked at the land and they knew their history, and they went out and they planted a grape variety where they thought it would do best. What do you do? There you are with your land. Are you scientific or are you intuitive? How do you guys do it?
Well, I mean, if you're smart, you have a business plan.
I'm talking, a business plan, that's the other, I want to know about business plan. It's, how do you decide, I looked at your picture of where your grapes are planted, where your Aglianico is in that lot, but how did you decide it would do well there?
Honestly,
as opposed to the other side?
Yeah, it's intuition. We've got some little undulations to the land, and I know it, in the summer evening, there's some warm air moving from this area to that area, so maybe that's something worthwhile. Or we have, even though it's only 12 acres, there are different colors of clay moving through, and what looks like almost, I guess it would have been a volcanic runoff riverbed, where there'll be, like a 50-foot wide stream of rock tumbling down, tumbling through, and then it will disappear. And just from digging around and planting things, certain things feel like they would be a better fit in one area than another. And maybe if you're lucky, you're right 75% of the time. So.
Have you ever had to make changes? Like you made a decision about one grape variety and then decided, no, it was good?
There are lots of mistakes. Yeah, probably 30% of the things I would, if I had the time and the money, I would definitely be changing a lot of things. There are things I planted in the wrong orientation. Things I discovered later were bad rootstock for this particular clone, etc. So it's all a learning process.
What's the grape you've always wanted to work with?
Always wanted to work with?
I know you play around with Nebbiolo a bit.
Yeah, that's just at least with the Lake County vineyard. I mean, I'll keep playing around with it forever, but I can only expect, and I won't know why, 1 out of 4 years to work out. It's just
Diamante, man.
Yeah, it's just not right. My closeted dream is I'd like to be one of those cool climate Syrah people. Or actually, I'd really like to be making some cooler climate white wines. And I want to do sparkling someday, but I don't even know how to begin getting into that sort of thing. So, yeah, I don't know. Wine is, there's always something new. There's always some new Portuguese grape. There's always Listan Prieto. There's always some other thing that you want to be doing. Being in Sebastopol, making Amarone, it's endless.
Nice.
A quick question for you. I've been to your tasting room quite often in Oakland, but what about your vineyards in Lake County? Is that open to the public, or would it have been in the before time?
Before time.
Yeah, we've done vineyard tours before. There just isn't a whole lot out there, so like a nice lunch spread may or may not be included.
Is it a tasting room, or is it just more of like vineyard tour?
No, it's just more of a vineyard.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but if you were ever passing through, let me know, and could schedule a little visit. That's for sure.
Cool.
I agree.
I'm wondering if Paul or Pietro could comment about alcohol content. I was surprised to see that both wines tonight were 14.5%, because I'm used to lower alcohol in European wines often. Could you guys comment on that?
I'll let Paul go first.
Yes, my landlord seems to be building a new addition to the house in this moment. So pardon me if you hear like banging. Yeah, I think we're at place when it comes to alcohol content. So Campania, we're in southern Italy. We're rather close to the Mediterranean. It's just frankly warmer there, and you're going to get a lot of out of a lot of places in Italy. Campania, Basilicata, Apulia, Calabria. These places get rather warm, and you're just looking at ripeness, really. Ripeness on the vine. It is pronounced a little bit more in some of the reds in Campania and actually just some of the reds in southern Italy. Even if you get up to Veneto with some of the Amarone, which reach 15 to 16, there's something about the way alcohol presents itself in southern Italian reds. To me, southern Italian reds are a little broader on the palate. They reach not just fruit, but also secondary aromas and herbs and all these things. They have kind of a width to them. And for me, personally, as a sommelier, when I encounter wines that have that width to them, alcohol tends to show up more. Whereas if you have wines that are a little bit more vertically inclined, a little bit more structured, the alcohol tends to integrate a little better. So I think it's laid a little bit more bare in the San Salvatore and maybe even in the Mastro Berardino a bit, because 14 was showing warmer vintage notes to it, despite the fact that I think that wine is rather brooding at the moment. But yeah, I just think southern Italian climate is a big factor, frankly.
I will say too, just from the vineyard, Aglianico, it's a very, very late ripening grape.
Right.
Slow maturation curve. And
isn't it like the last grape in southern Italy to be picked?
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Middle of November is not uncommon in some areas. But you're kind of waiting for the tannin to start to recede and soften a little bit. So a lot of the picking time, you're just tasting it every day, kind of deciding where the acid, the sugar, and the tannin are, and where those three things kind of intersect into that moment where you have to pull it. And a tannic variety like Aglianico and Sagrantino has a similar issue. It's just naturally it accumulates sugar at a crazy rate. Aglianico's not quite so much, but the tannic grapes, you got to decide, how far are you willing to go to have a slightly softer wine or a higher acidity or lower alcohol, because you can't have all three at once. They're interrelated in such a way that, the tannin is going to be more austere if you pick it lower sugar, hence lower alcohol. So it's kind of a moving target, and each vintage is a little bit different. And sometimes they're just intervening factors, like in California, where you can't find people to pick grapes. And, sometimes that's part of a vintage as well. Yeah. But generally, I've had 13% Aglianicos, and I've liked them. But it's hard when you're talking about ripeness and expressiveness and all these super slippery aesthetic terms with this sort of thing. But yeah, lower alcohol means more austere. And that can be, I would love to have 3 Aglianicos, an austere one, a medium one, and then a Reserva type of thing. Just can't break that thing into as many components.
The Radici is only 13.5. Yours is 14.
How is it in the glass, Mary? Is it showing up in the glass?
It's changing. It's changing.
But is there alcohol?
I've had this open for 2 hours.
Right.
And I definitely, it's softening somewhat to me. It's a different color to Pietro's. I can only describe it as a little browner, and Pietro's is more ruby.
Yeah.
But it's certainly softened since I first opened it around 5.
Susan, I will say that, you know, I also think the winemaker is a big part of this. I recently took on a Sardinian producer named Cardedu. I don't know. Salvatore's gonna have to help me with that. But they grow grapes in the farthest southerly part of Sardinia, in an area called Jerzu. And it's I just don't know how he balances that wine in such a way where the alcohol it's high, but it's not on the palate high. There's got to be some alchemy there, some strange alchemy there. Pietro?
Still learning, man.
Yeah, man. Shit.
But I do think, yeah, it's hard to explain how important alcohol, or not important, that's the wrong word, what a central role the alcohol level plays to just how we perceive a wine. And I've been on alcohol trials where people de-alcoholize wine, and you can taste, you know, 13.0, 13.1, 13.2, all the way up to 15. And that little 0.1 difference makes, first of all, it's not linear. There will be something at 13.8, and then it won't be until 14.6 that you get something good and balanced again. But it'll be balanced in a completely different place. The fruit profile will be different. The way the tannin presents itself will be different. The acid will feel different. I don't know. Yeah, that's the whole alcohol thing is like a little bit of alchemical mystery. And sometimes it just integrates beautifully, and sometimes it sticks out in difficult vintages. And it's, yeah, a combination of factors, and I think the winemaker usually has to take the blame on it if it doesn't work. So it's definitely a topic, especially these days when people are more into lower alcohol wines, fresher fruit, more fruit driven. Acidity is sort of the new oak for lots of different beverages.
California. Yeah.
Which I think is good. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's a change thing, but it'll open up new doors as the pendulum swings again.
Yeah. Come with acidity comes nuance, so to speak.
Yeah. No, that's true. It's true. And then we all perceive, you know, the way we perceive things can vary by a magnitude. The way we perceive tannins, it turns out that like saliva production can be a tenfold difference between people, which affects how they process tannin. Even smells, you know, that's very like primal stuff in the middle of the emotional sensor area of the brain. So it's, you know, these are very complicated things.
Ain't that the truth?
Barry, I have a question for you and anyone else who has the Maestro Bernardino. To me, there's a little bit of I mentioned Northern Rhone kind of funky Syrah earlier. This to me tastes like there's a little bit of Brett on it. So I'm curious if what you're drinking right now, Mary, has any of that like meaty funkiness, or if anyone else is experiencing that, or if that's maybe just characteristic of the wine, or if this is maybe an off bottle.
Yeah, and folks, Brettanomyces is what Adrian is referring to, and it's a barn.
Yeah, I certainly when I opened it, I had some funkiness, and I think it's sort of still around. It's lessened. I've only got a little bit.
Yes,
here.
I had the same experience.
Anybody else having the Maestro Bernardino?
Yeah, there's still a little bit of that there, I would say. But it's soft. Excuse me. The wine itself has started to soften.
Is this biodynamic, or is it? I mean, some of the wines, if they're of a certain age or a certain style, they can have a hint of Brett on there.
Yeah. It's also the winemaking too. I would think it's in the barrels as well.
Oh, it turns out it was under the whole
I don't know how well they clean the barrel. It seems like
Dana has something to say.
A stupid thing to say, but I just don't. And that's plagued a lot of Southern Italian dirty barrel. Birds inside, and you get these little bacterial infections and things.
No.
Yeah, I have just an announcement to make, just in case anybody cares, which is totally off topic, and I apologize, but I think it's kind of fun. that I just wanted you to know that the Warriors won their first preseason game over Denver, and I think that's pretty amazing because Draymond Green and Wiseman were not playing. So there you go. Okay. Thank you.
Go Dogs.
Cheers.
And the wine is really fucking good too.
I thought you had to hold the space bar and then it goes back to mute. That's usually.
All right, am I muted?
No, whoever you are.
All right. Go Warriors. Hi, Elizabeth. Nice to see you. And Paul. And nice to meet Alessandro. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. That was a mic drop that I just saw.
Would someone explain what biodynamic is? I see it on one of the cards as well. Biodynamic preparation in the vineyard to maintain soil composition.
Woo!
What's biodynamic?
Pietro, you want this one or shall I?
I defer to you.
All right, you want me to start and then you take
Yeah.
up with
Yeah,
the
yeah.
stuff because I'm not a winemaker, so. Biodynamics. So you have organic winemaking, you have sustained or sustainable winemaking, and then you have biodynamics. And biodynamics is less of a hardcore certification, although there are groups and certifications out there. Biodynamics is really rooted in philosophy, and it's a method of working in excuse me, in the vineyard. Pardon me. Method of working in the vineyard and in the farm, where you're essentially you're bringing biodiversity back into your vineyard. It's kind of about it's a method that was championed by Rudolf Steiner in the 1920s, and it's about returning your soils to their natural state. It's about increasing the organic matter inside the soils. And you do this through 9 preparations in the vineyard. And, biodynamics it's people kind of pick and choose how far they want to go. But there are hardcore biodynamic producers, and they do the full 9 preparations. And they're essentially what they say is you have to kind of go into it blindly and do these preparations, like filling a cow's horn with manure and planting that in your vineyard. And there's a lot of some crazy stuff. But that if you follow these and you do them year after year after year, that you're increasing the organic matter in your soils, and you're creating better raw materials in order to grow grapes, so to speak. So it's about bringing biodiversity inside your vineyard and matching that up with the phases of the moon. And if anybody is a farmer, they know that there is a connection between what happens in your vineyard or farm and what happens above your head. And biodynamics is very much a part of that. Now it's becoming kind of fad-like. You can get an organic certification. You can be certified organic, but to be biodynamic is you have to kind of give over yourself, or, a little bit for the preparations. So it's different. Not all organic people who are certified organic are biodynamic. It's a very short percentage, but all people who are practicing biodynamic are certified organic.
Yeah, so kind of more stringent in some ways, and the agencies that actually certify for dynamic, like Demeter, there are also limitations on the total amount of sulfur you can use in a wine. And like Paul was saying, if we were really doing it properly, biodynamic thing, we would pick at a certain moon phase. If we were bottling, we would bottle under a certain moon phase. Different wine movements would all be paying attention to a few different factors like that. So it kind of, it borders between being utterly insane and kind of ascientific. But Paul and I have both worked at a wine shop, and there's something to be said for it. I think maybe the wider science is out on it, but I'm pretty sure that I can pick up on when somebody is a biodynamic grower. There is a certain something that's there, a certain lift, a certain minerality, a certain, something that happens with all those procedures. And scientifically, people are coming back and looking at, soil and all the, in the roots, there are all sorts of little organisms that actually shuttle micronutrients back and forth, and it does seem to have an effect. Exactly.
The soil makes sense to me, but phases of the moon, do you believe it?
Well, I'm kind of a high-low kind of guy. I don't mind combining the Earth and the moon. I think
moon tides are real, man. It's a real deal. I'm telling you.
Yeah, I don't know that we know all the data points.
I don't think that helps any.
I'm serious. Why not? I mean, like gravitate. I mean, I think there's got to be something to be said for it. I do.
Are there any farmers in here?
I killed my ficus, so no.
All right. That's fair. That's all right. You and I are in the same camp, but if we had Robin Parr here, who is a wonderful, great student of mine, but she grows amazing orchids and just all these amazing flowers, and she'll have something to say about this. But there is something to be said about that. That there is a connection between what happens in your vineyard and what happens above your head. But hold on, I just want to say this. So I've got some biodynamic preparations for you, Susan. Are you ready? Horn manure enhances the life of the soil and the relationship between soil and plants, and is made from cow manure buried inside a cow horn during the winter months. Horsetail tea helps prevent fungal diseases and balance the watery elements in plants and soil. Biodynamic spray and compost preparations bring plants into a dynamic relationship with soil, water, air, warmth, and cosmos to help them develop in a healthy and balanced way. Why did they have to throw cosmos in there? They had me right there. Access the full spectrum of nutrients they need and become more resilient to pests, disease, and extreme climate conditions. Now, for me, I watched a video of French winemaker and Sancerre holding his soil and talking about how his soil, when he came to his father's winery, his soil was one thing. But after 10, 15 years of biodynamics, the soil was just different. He was holding it in his hands when he was talking about it. That's like stuck in my mind. This young winemaker who's holding his family's, his inheritance, so to speak, and is trying to slowly improve it over time. Last thing I'll say about biodynamics, Susan, is that, and I don't think he's a full biodynamic guy, but it was among my first vineyard walks in Italy, and it was in Barolo, in this little vineyard called Pira, in the commune of Castiglione Falletto, which is one of the great communes of Barolo. And I was walking with this guy, Luca Roagna, and as we were walking through the vineyards in Trompson, he was just tossing things down kind of absentmindedly, sticks and branches and things, and crunching and walking on them and just kind of making his way through the vineyard. And I asked him, like, what are you doing, Luca? And he says, I'm fixing my father's mistakes. And his father used sprays and things, pesticides and herbicides. And mind you, in the 60s, pesticides and herbicides were the thing. They sorted you out. You were able to grow a lot. Now we learned that those things essentially rendered the soil kind of inert almost, or what's the word I'm looking for, Pietro? It kind of bled out the soils.
Yeah. I think we're still trying to understand how Roundup and some of the other applicants do seem to really put a damper on microbial activity in the soil, but there's something there with all of that.
And the soils lie fallow when they were hit year after year with herbicides and pesticides, and that's what Luca was trying to do, was just trying to return biodiversity, return growth and plant life into his vineyard.
Yeah.
There's a
So
lot
beyond daddy issues in Italy, another way to approach the biodynamic question that I find really fascinating is you can download an app on your phone that gives you the 4 different profile days that affect how wine tastes. So there's root day, leaf day, flower day, and a fruit day. And I would swear that you can start guessing over time where the moon is and how the wine is reacting and how you are reacting and tasting it. So the root days really are rooty, earthy, very angular, very tannin and acid. Leaf days I kind of like because they bring out a lot of whole cluster elements. A lot of that like stemminess is in there, both a little bit of fruit. Flower days are very delicate, kind of fleeting stuff. But you should download that on your phone. You can get a free version, and it's following the biodynamic calendar, and you can see if you actually. And then there's a whole question like, is it you or is it the wine? Like, what is the actual, thing that's being affected here in the matrix?
You.
But
Sounds like a fishing app. Like you can download the fishing apps, and there it makes sense because of the tides and like nutrients and stuff.
Yeah. According to my fishing app, Adrian, it says today is not a good day to drink wine. According to the biodynamic calendar, today is a no day.
Every day is a good day.
Every day is a good day.
Cheers to that. Good.
Yeah. But there's something to it. I don't know what it is. There's something to it.
Well, there's definitely something to be said for like, this is a bit of a different thing, but my grandfather emigrated from Croatia, and like they just have figs over there, and so he brought fig cuttings with him and grew fig trees in his backyard. And he has this fig tree that to this day has the best figs I've ever eaten in my life. And I don't say that from a like, okay, I grew up with it standpoint. It's like I've bought a lot of figs from producers over the years, and they're just not the same. And I remember like at one point my grandparents died. My mom lives in their house now, and she had her new gardener like sprayed the tree, and I was like, what are you doing? And the figs like changed a little bit, and I was like, don't do that ever again, like don't mess with it. He never like sprayed anything on that tree, or like he just like took really good care of it and cut it like religiously and during the seasons. And it was organic before anyone even really was using the word organic, right? He just like took care of that tree. And there's something to be said about like, just like taking care of it naturally and like, and fixing it. And like, there's a really good wine shop in Oakland that's all biodynamic or mostly I should say biodynamic. And like, one of the things we found is the wine there's like just really different. And I don't know if that's a function of how they grow it or just the fact that the producers they're bringing in are like, making very different wines from everyone else. But it definitely has a different like quality to it from stuff that you like generally buy. And yeah.
Mike, which wine shop are you talking about?
Punch Down. Yeah, and
they specialize in organic, biodynamic, natural wines. There's a spectrum to believe.
Yeah, and just everything. It's like no other wine shop you go to because everything's just so like different there, right? And it's not. I wouldn't say it's better or worse. It's just different, right?
Now I'll tell you, as a restaurant somm, which is where kind of most of my experience comes from. Those can very often be tough places to go on a list because what I'm describing might not show up in the glass that night.
Yeah.
And I distinctly recall producers who I go down. There was one from Liguria called Testamata, I remember, and I would go down to the cellar and I'd pull out a white and I'd be like, no, that's not the right color. Pull out another bottle. No, that's not the right color. And oh, that's the right color. And that's the one that I would open because it had that color that wasn't super, I don't know, coppered out. And he was a full-on biodynamic producer. And I'll tell you, every bottle was different.
Yeah.
So it got to be a little bit of a pain in the butt in that way, I will say.
Yeah, definitely.
Just wasn't what I was describing.
I'll second what Mike said though. Punchdown and places like that are so much fun if you're used to, I'll say in quotes, traditional wines.
Yeah.
Again, trying to do the blind tasting there where they just pour like some of the staff favorites and you're drinking it is like, well, I think I can get the color, maybe. But in terms of figuring out it's, and they're beautiful wines. There is such different expression of the grape. So yeah, 100% second that.
Yeah, it's so different, right?
Yeah, we've never won.
Punchdown is good because there's a definable thread that runs through it's not just natural randomness all over the board. I think, yeah, I can endorse a Punchdown adventure for just about everybody.
Yeah, definitely. Has anyone who's gone there done their like random wine tasting
and figured it out?
Yeah. No.
I've been there twice and done the random ones, and I've yet to win the free glass.
It's hard with national wines.
You know, sorry, this is random, but like going back a little in the conversation was, you know, talking about alcohol content. It's really funny, like there's a beer analogy that popped in my head, and especially now is the season. There's a beer called Aglianico Class, and it's been made for years, and every year is a little different, and it's basically like a holiday beer. And it's 14%, it's 14+%, and which normally like just kills a beer. Like when you make beer with that high percentage content, it's just not good. And there's some rare exceptions to it, but these like monks or something have been making this beer forever, and they've got it down, and you're drinking this 14% beer and you're like, how is this so good? And it was like an early lesson for me, kind of even before I really got into wine, of like alcohol content like doesn't really matter necessarily. It's like matching up the right alcohol content with the right like brewing method with like whatever ingredients you're using. Or like in the wine world, like certain wines and certain years and certain temperatures like are going to be at that percentage, right? And it's just like it was a good lesson for me not to like concentrate on alcohol percentage necessarily when buying something, because like if it's good, it's good, and like it doesn't matter necessarily what that falls out on, you know, unless you're like sensitive to that, which is a whole different matter. So yeah,
you have to go back to work after you have a drink.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly.
We'll just have a little bit of this 14%, we'll have like a correct, you know, and then you're
yeah. Funnily enough, I took it to Utah with me, like kind of on the cusp of summer, and I was drinking it in Utah, you know, celebrating the fact that I was like over 4 times the Utah beer limit. But it wasn't the right beer for that season. So
yeah.
So Paul, if this was a dinner down in Volturier where Aglianico grows, what would be our after dinner drink?
Whew.
They do Amari and other stuff like that down
They do. They do Amaro with artichokes. Alessandro, are you paying any attention?
Oh.
Ah,
I'm here.
I knew you were there.
I'm just cleaning and doing.
Tell me about Digestivo e Campagna. Cynar? No.
Well, no, Cynar is Sicilia.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
In Campania,
he said not that.
It's not the Amaro Lucano.
Oh, is that from Campania? I thought it was from Basilicata, but probably a local Amaro.
Actually, yeah, you're right, Basilicata.
Yeah, I think so.
Amaro delle Sirene. It's beautiful, from Naples.
Buono.
The Naples area.
Yeah.
What else?
You know, Adrian, I think we're close enough to Tuscany where grappa is probably going to play a big role.
What is that, David?
This is Strega from Campania.
Strega. Wow.
You know, the Strega we actually use it a lot for dessert, for pastry.
Yeah. It's really sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it Alessandro, is Strega from Campania?
I think so. You know, I don't remember if he's from Basilicata or from Campania, honestly.
Yeah.
Benevento?
Benevento. There we go.
Benevento. That's in the north.
Oh, it's northern?
Yeah,
No,
northern.
no, Benevento is south, but it's not Campania.
It's not Campania. Oh, okay.
Or do they make grappa from Aglianico grapes down there?
Ooh. I've never come across it. I always know of the grappa distilleries in the north, in the Veneto and Alto Adige and Friuli.
Way up in the north.
Yeah, way up in the north. I'm sure they do, Adrian. I'm positive. I'm sure they do everywhere.
No.
I think the Amaro, though, I've come across a lot of Amari from central Italy. That's really where Amaro becomes really, I think, very interesting. It's that central Italian or like those Alpine style. Tuscany, La Marche, Abruzzo, big Amari. Varnelli.
Taverna, Siciliano.
Verna, yes, excusa. But we're talking Italy. That Sicily's a different country.
A lot of fennel too, right?
Finocchio in Campania?
That vermouth?
I don't know.
It's like sacrilege, Pietro, but have you ever thought of taking a vintage that just didn't quite work out and making grappa?
Thinking about that right now, actually.
Because of smoke taint or because of something else? The balance.
Just because 2020 sucks.
Pietro, we'll be down there tasting in a second. You just email us. We'll be there.
Doing that.
We'll see. We'll see.
Wasn't it? Yeah, I think St. George is doing that.
It's always a thought, you know. It'd be fun to have some of that to play with.
Yeah.
It's always hard to sort of give up on something though and give it to the distiller. Say, I don't want it.
Yeah, I just read an article. St. George is, I think they're taking some of the like smoke affected or the fire affected wine and they're making grappa out of it now.
Yeah. There's a good amount of that going on right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we'll be seeing some of that on the shelves to try out. They can. I actually want to talk to somebody about that because you can control the amount of smoke you let through with the heads and tails and how you're doing the distillation. So I'm curious to see what comes out of that.
Yeah, that'd be fascinating.
That was my thought too, because I thought smoke was pretty heavy aromatic compounds, so they're gonna be later more in the tails.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's probably up to the person who's doing the passes to decide what they're going for. But yeah, smoke is very complicated though. It's not just one thing. It's at least 30 different families of different bound and free elements. So it's complicated for sure. I don't know if we know exactly, like in a high proof thing, if that changes. A lot of it's acid dependent, the aromas that are released. I'm not sure in distilled products what that would look like potentially, or how it would change down the road or in the bottle. Yeah, more science questions.
Yeah, we need a distiller up in here. I know a guy. That'd be fun.
Bring him.
Yeah, right.
How affected were you this year in terms of the smoke and proximity to fires and all that?
Not bad. The fires got to about 20 miles away, so at least all those fresh phenolic kind of things were pretty far away, but it was just a lot of gray days cumulatively. There are some new theories out now about like UV light breaking down some of these compounds when they're suspended in the air. So if you're far away, you're getting a different sort of profile than if you were closer to the fire. It doesn't seem to be any worse than what we went through in 2018 with the Lake County fires. But I'm going to start having things tested pretty soon here. So, yeah, we'll see. I will say a couple grapes like Barbera, it is actually kind of smoke resistant. I don't know why, but it does not show smoke anywhere near as much as Sangiovese, Negro Amaro, Dolcetto. Yeah.
Wow. Even
just a little asterisk to tuck in the back of your mind.
I wonder what it is. Well, good.
Yeah.
Yeah?
That was a good dive.
It was a good dive. That was fun. Any other questions?
Is there going to be a holiday offering that will happen?
So likely not with Alessandro. Andiamo. Likely not with a kind of a Zoom tasting. But I know Pietro's getting into the holiday season. Alessandro and I are going to play with holiday offerings. So there'll be holiday wine pairing offerings. Things that are not big commitments. Like let us take over your digestivo for Christmas and put together a little pack, or
Digestivo, aperitivo, or
antipasto. We have a lot of little fun things that we're gonna be playing with. So yeah, so look out for that. But in terms of Pietro, Alessandro, and I collaborating, I mean, Alessandro got into this a little bit late, but I think we're going to attack next year pretty hard and come up with a nice calendar, and perhaps make these things a bit more formal, just in terms of maybe a bit more of a presentation in the beginning. And yeah, so we're going to play around with the concept. I mean, we all agree that Zoom sucks, right? No more so than me. For those of you that have been to my classes, like, I like to get up and yell and run around, and I can't do that right now. It's bothering me, this box that I'm having to stay in. But anyway, we're gonna make some improvements and make it dangerous for next year. So look out for that. If any of you want something private, just reach out to us. I have a winemaker, we have a chef, and we have a sommelier. That's a pretty dangerous combination. So put us to work, huh?
Not dangerous, amazing combination. That's
great.
a great combination.
Well, on behalf of Pietro and Alessandro and I, we just want to say thank you so much, and salute. Cheers. Be safe this holiday.
Happy holidays to everybody.
Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
To 2021.
Keep on drinking.
Yes. Be safe. Imbibe
Glasses in the
well.
glass.
Buono. Ciao, ciao.
Thank you.
Ciao, ciao.
Cheers all.
Thank you. Ciao.
Ciao.